Welcome back to the Recall Room. If you're joining us for part 2 of our conversation about senior dogs, welcome back. And if you're listening to this episode on its own, don't worry because we're picking up right where we left off. In part 1, we talked about what happens as our dogs age and some of the physical and behavioral changes that can come along with getting older. And now we're getting into the part that I think matters most. What can we actually do about it? Because while we can't stop our dogs from aging, as much as I'm sure every dog owner would happily sign up for, if that were an option, we can change the way we care for them as their needs evolve. Sometimes that means adjusting their exercise. Sometimes it means making their environment a little easier to navigate. Sometimes it means paying closer attention to subtle changes in behavior. And sometimes it means realizing that something we've been chalking up to old age deserves a conversation with the veterinarian. Our senior dogs have spent years learning us, adapting to us, and becoming part of our lives. And as they get older, it's our turn to adapt to them. Let's talk about how we can do that and how we can help our dogs make the most of their golden years. I'm going to touch on this first, and I'm going to say it again. You absolutely can teach an old dog new tricks. I have no idea how that phrase became shorthand for someone being too old to learn something new, because dogs apparently never got that memo. Senior dogs can learn. They can form new associations, they can learn new cues, they can learn new routines, they can learn new ways of communicating with us. And learning doesn't suddenly become pointless just because a dog has reached a certain age. In fact, training during the senior years can become incredibly valuable. But the purpose of training may change. When you have a puppy, so much of that training is preparation. You're teaching skills that you hope they'll use for the rest of their life. You're building communication. You're helping them navigate a world that they barely understand. With an adolescent dog, training is often about continuing those skills while their brain seems determined to test whether you really meant any of it. During adulthood, training might become more about maintaining skills, learning new ones, solving specific problems, or simply doing something together. But with a senior dog, training can become adaptation. It can become a way to help them navigate changes in their body, changes in their senses, changes in their confidence, and probably changes in their world. Which means the question that we ask changes. Instead of asking, how do I get my dog to do this? We might start asking, how can I make this easier for my dog to do? Now that is a very different approach to training. Take something as simple as sit. Your dog has known how to sit for, 10 years. You ask, they don't. You ask again, still nothing. It might be easy to think, come on, you know this. And they probably do. But knowing how to do something and being physically comfortable to do it are two completely different things. Maybe their hips hurt. Maybe their knees hurt. Maybe lowering themselves onto a slippery floor feels unstable. Maybe even getting back up is difficult. So instead of assuming the training has failed, we change the question. Does my dog actually need to sit right now? Could they stand instead? Could we use a nose target? Could we teach another behavior that accomplishes the same thing without asking their body to do something uncomfortable? And sometimes the answer is wonderfully simple. We just stop asking for the sit. That might sound strange in a culture where dogs are expected to sit for practically everything. Sit for food, sit before the door opens, sit before crossing the street, sit before getting a treat, sit to say please in general. Sit because apparently humans decided at some point that standing politely wasn't good enough. But if sitting has become uncomfortable, there is no prize for making an old dog keep doing it. Training should serve the dog and the life you share together. Your dog should not have to serve the training. And that becomes especially important during the senior years. If you're training on hardwood or tile, put down a rug or mat. Give them traction. If you're asking for behaviors that require them to lie down, give them something soft. If they fatigue quickly, train for 30 seconds instead of 5 minutes. If they need longer to process what you're asking, give them longer. And this one is important. Don't automatically interpret slower as confused. Sometimes senior dogs simply just need a little more time. We humans are terrible about this. We say sit, half a second passes, we say sit again, another half second, sit, sit, sit. And meanwhile, the dog is probably thinking, I heard you the first time. Give them a moment. Let them process. Let them move their body. Watch what happens next. Because when we repeat cues over and over, we often make communication less clear, not more clear. I'm also going to take a sidestep here and let you in on a little secret for dogs in general for any age. Anytime you repeat a cue, you are resetting their processing clock. So every time you ask them to sit again and only wait a half a second, you are only doing yourself a disservice. Ask the cue once and wait for them to respond. This goes towards any age. And speaking of communication, one of the best things you can teach a dog before they actually need it is another way for you to talk to each other. If your dog knows mostly verbal cues, start adding visual ones. Pair a hand signal with behaviors they already know. A visual recall cue. A visual cue for sit if sitting is still comfortable. A visual cue for down, a cue for wait, a cue that means come with me. You can even create visual markers for things like yes, good, all done, because if hearing begins to fade, you don't want communication as a whole to disappear with it. You'll want another language already waiting. And if your dog is already experiencing hearing loss, don't assume that means training is over. It means we change the information we're giving them. Visual cues, body movement, touch cues when appropriate and when the dog is comfortable with them. Even environmental cues can become part of communication. And this is one reason I love thinking about training as communication rather than obedience, because obedience asks, did the dog do what I said? Communication asks, did the dog understand what I was trying to tell them? And did I understand what they were trying to tell me? That second question becomes increasingly important with senior dogs, because sometimes your dog says no. Not the word no, obviously, but with hesitation. Turning away, moving away, stopping, freezing, avoiding your hand, refusing to move forward. And especially in an older dog, that hesitation deserves curiosity. If your dog has happily jumped into the car for 11 years and suddenly refuses, don't start by assuming they're being difficult. Look at the jump. If your dog has happily had their nails trimmed for years and suddenly pulls their paw away, ask whether holding that leg in that position is uncomfortable for them. If they used to hop onto the grooming table and suddenly stop at the bottom, maybe the problem isn't the grooming. Maybe the problem is getting onto the table itself. Sometimes the solution to a training problem is surprisingly physical. Add a ramp, change the surface, change the position, give them more time, support their body differently, move their activity somewhere else, and suddenly the behavior problem disappears. This is also where cooperative care can become really valuable. Cooperative care is essentially teaching dogs ways to voluntarily participate in things that need to happen to their bodies. Grooming, nail care, ear checks, eye care, medication routines, physical examinations. Instead of every interaction being, hold still while I do this to you, we can build behaviors that allow the dog to participate. Maybe they learn to rest their chin on your hand or on a towel while you examine them. Maybe they learn to offer a paw. Maybe they learn a nose target that helps you position them. Maybe you teach them to stand comfortably on a mat while you look over their body. And we can build in opportunities to pause. That doesn't mean a dog gets to opt out of every necessary medical procedure. Sometimes something has to happen. But giving dogs predictability and participation whenever we reasonably can make routine care much less stressful. And think about how valuable that becomes as a dog gets older. Senior dogs may need more vet visits, More physical exams, more medications, more monitoring, maybe more grooming assistance because they can't comfortably reach or maintain themselves the way they once did. Skills that make handling easier aren't silly tricks anymore. They're life skills. And the same is true for things like ramps. Please don't wait until your dog physically cannot jump into the car and then introduce a ramp for the first time. Because guess what? Now you have two problems. Your dog can't comfortably jump into the car, and there's a weird plank leading into it that has never been there before. Teach the ramp while they still can learn it comfortably. Put it flat on the ground, let them investigate it, reward them for stepping onto it, gradually change the angle, make it completely boring. By the time they actually need it, it's just another part of life. And the same goes for steps, harnesses, mobility equipment, different sleeping arrangements, visual cues, new bathroom routines. If you can anticipate something your dog may need later, teaching it before it becomes necessary can make the transition much easier. But training senior dogs doesn't have to be purely practical. We can teach them things just because they're fun. Touch my hand, find the treat, pick between those two toys, put your nose in this box, go around that cone, learn the name of a new toy, search the room for a hidden snack, push something with your nose. There doesn't have to be some grand behavioral goal. Sometimes learning is simply something you do together. And this is where enrichment and training start to overlap, because enrichment isn't about keeping a dog busy. It's about giving them opportunities to engage in behaviors that matter to them. Sniffing, searching, foraging, exploring, chewing when appropriate for that dog, licking, problem solving, making choices, interacting with their environment, and senior dogs still need those opportunities. We just may need to adjust the difficulty. A puzzle that was fun at 6 might become frustrating at 13, so make it easier. That's not cheating. Your dog doesn't know they're playing on beginner mode. They know they found the food. Success itself can be a part of the enjoyment. Hide treats somewhere easy to find. Scatter food across a snuffle mat. Put treats inside of an open cardboard box instead of constructing some elaborate puzzle that requires an engineering degree. Let them sniff through the yard. Take them somewhere just to smell. And one of my favorite forms of enrichment for senior dogs costs absolutely nothing. Let them take their time. And this can be hard for us, admittedly. We're walking. We have somewhere to go. Our dog stops. They smell a bush. And smell it. And smell it. And smell it. And apparently this bush contains the complete history of civilization because they are not moving. Our instinct is, come on, we gotta go, let's start moving. But especially with our senior dogs, sometimes the destination doesn't matter. The sniffing is the activity. If your dog can no longer comfortably walk 3 miles, that doesn't mean their 30-minute walk has to become a race to cover as much distance as possible. Maybe you walk 3 blocks. Maybe you walk 1. Maybe you stand in the same patch of grass for 10 minutes. If your dog is engaged, investigating, and enjoying themselves, that's a successful outing. And this is where we have to be careful not to confuse physical exhaustion with enrichment. A dog does not have to be exhausted for an activity to have been worthwhile. Senior dogs especially don't need us constantly trying to tire them out. We can aim for fulfillment instead. Let them use their senses. Let them make choices. Let them participate. And when you're training or enriching a senior dog, watch for fatigue. Not just dramatic fatigue, the subtle stuff. Responses becoming slower, losing interest in food, turning away, changing positions frequently, panting when the environment isn't particularly warm, becoming less coordinated, choosing to lie down, or walking away. Those can all be reasons to stop and reassess. We don't have to squeeze one more repetition out of them. Finish while they're still enjoying themselves. 2 good minutes are better than 10 minutes where the last 8 were work. And maybe that's one of the biggest lessons senior dogs can teach us about training in general. More isn't always better. Faster isn't always better. Harder isn't always better, and perfect isn't always better. Sometimes good training looks like noticing that your dog is tired and stopping when that happens. Sometimes it looks like changing the behavior you're asking for. Sometimes it looks like throwing your training plan out entirely because your dog showed up differently today. And that's okay, because we're not training the dog they were 5 years ago. We're not training the dog we wish they could still be. We're training the dog standing in front of us right now, today. And tomorrow, that dog might show up a little differently. That's part of loving a senior dog. We adjust with them. We pay attention. We keep communicating. We find new ways to do old things. And sometimes we find completely new things to enjoy together. Because getting older doesn't mean your dog's world has to stop. It just might need to change shape. And that brings us to something bigger than training. Because once we start looking at our senior dog's world through their eyes, we begin noticing all kinds of ways we can make that world easier to navigate. The floors they walk across, the places they sleep, how they get into the car, how they get outside, where their food and water are, how much choice they have, how often they get to do the things they still love. And next, we're going to zoom out a bit, because supporting a senior dog isn't just about managing what they're losing. It's about protecting what they still have and creating a life that still feels like theirs. When a dog gets older, something very understandable can happen to us. We become protective, we notice the stiffness, we notice the hesitation, maybe they slip once on the floor, maybe they stumble on a walk, maybe they don't recover from activity as quickly as they used to. And suddenly we start looking at everything around them and seeing risk. Don't run, don't jump, don't climb that, don't go too far, don't play too hard, be careful, slow down, and some of that is absolutely necessary. Our dogs aren't always very good at assessing their own physical limitations, especially when something exciting is happening. Our dog Jupiter, for instance, still tries to jump onto the bed every single morning, even though sometimes her legs and hips tell her absolutely no. To lay out another example, the 12-year-old dog who has always loved chasing squirrels their entire life probably isn't going to stop mid-chase and think, you know what? Considering the current condition of my lumbar spine, this really does seem unwise. They're going to chase that squirrel, and they're going to keep trying to do it. So yes, sometimes we do have to make those decisions for them. But there's a difference between protecting a senior dog and removing their life from them. And finding that balance is one of the biggest responsibilities we have during this stage, because quality of life isn't simply the absence of danger. It's the presence of things worth doing, things worth smelling, things worth exploring, things worth anticipating, comfort, connection, choice, and joy. So instead of asking, how do I stop my senior dog from doing things, I think a better question is, how do I help them keep doing the things they love safely? Maybe your dog has always loved riding in the car. The problem isn't the car, the problem is getting into it. So add a ramp. Maybe they love sleeping on the couch. The problem isn't the couch, the problem is jumping up onto it and also off of it. So add steps, a ramp, or another comfortable sleeping option that gives them something easier to access. Maybe they love exploring the neighborhood. The problem isn't the walking, although, sometimes it could be. 5 miles just probably isn't comfortable anymore. So shorten the length. Drive them to their favorite spot, take more breaks, let them sniff. Maybe your dog has always loved hiking. Perhaps the 8-mile trail isn't realistic anymore, but maybe there's a flat half-mile trail where they can spend about 40 minutes investigating every tree. The activity changes. The experience doesn't have to disappear, though. And sometimes the biggest improvements happen inside of our homes. We've talked about slippery floors already, but they're worth bringing up again because they have such a huge impact on an older dog's independence. Imagine if every time you walked through your house, the floor felt like ice. You probably wouldn't move around as much anymore. You'd hesitate. You'd shorten your stride. You would tense your body. You might avoid certain rooms entirely. Now imagine your joints already hurting during that process. That's what a slick floor can become for senior dogs. So put down rugs, runners, yoga mats, whatever provides secure footing. Pay attention to the paths your dog actually uses. Maybe it's from the bed to the back door, from the living room to the water bowl, from the bedroom to wherever you spend your morning. Create little pathways of traction through their world. And think about stairs. Can your dog navigate them comfortably? Do they need supervision? Would traction strips help? Would a gate prevent a dog with vision or cognitive changes from accidentally attempting stairs when nobody is nearby? Does their most important stuff even need to be on another floor anymore? Sometimes the easiest solution isn't teaching a senior dog to navigate a difficult environment, it's just changing the environment. Move the bed, move the water, or add another water station. Put a comfy bed in the room where everyone spends time. Make the things they need easier to reach. And when we talk about comfort, we should also talk about rest. Because senior dogs often spend a lot of time sleeping. Give them good places to do it. And notice I said places, plural. Because dogs have preferences. Maybe they want the orthopedic bed sometimes. Maybe they want the rug. Maybe they want the couch. Maybe they want the sunny patch by the window. Maybe they want to be right next to you. And maybe sometimes they want everyone to leave them alone. Giving them options allows them to choose what feels best. That's something I think we can overlook when we're caring for an older dog. Choice. Because senior dogs can gradually lose choices without us realizing it. We decide where they go, how far they walk, when they exercise, what they're allowed to climb onto, which activities are safe, and again, some of that is necessary. But whenever we can safely give choice back, we probably should. On a walk, let them choose which direction to investigate sometimes. Let them decide whether they want to keep moving or spend another minute sniffing. Offer 2 enrichment activities and see which one they choose. Give them multiple comfortable places to rest. Let them decide whether they want interaction, and respect them when they don't. This becomes especially important from a social perspective, because your senior dog's social preferences may change. The dog who loved the dog park at 4 might have absolutely no interest in being body slammed by a Labrador teenager at 12. And that's fair. Honestly, that's very fair as somebody who has had that happen before. They may become more selective about dogs. And that's dogs entirely. More selective about people, more sensitive to noise, more easily overwhelmed in busy environments. And we don't need to force them to continue being the social dog they used to be. Maybe they still enjoy dogs as a whole, but now they prefer calm dogs. Maybe they like parallel walks instead of wrestling. Maybe they prefer one familiar friend instead of a group. Maybe they'd rather spend time with people. Maybe they'd rather sniff by themselves. We can listen to that. And this is another place where pain and sensory changes matter. If your hearing isn't as good, someone approaching from behind can be startling. If your vision has changed, fast movement can feel different. If your joints hurt, being bumped can also hurt. A senior dog becoming less tolerant doesn't necessarily mean their personality has fundamentally changed. The experience of the interaction may have changed, so advocate for them. Don't make them tolerate the puppy climbing all over them just because you think they'll tell the puppy when they've had enough. Maybe they shouldn't have to. Give them an escape. Give them a quiet place. Step in before they need to escalate. And if your senior dog lives with younger dogs, make sure they get time away from them. A puppy may think your 13-year-old dog is the greatest wrestling partner ever created, but your 13-year-old dog may have submitted a formal complaint to management. And you want to be that management. You want to give the old dog a break. And while we're talking about maintaining quality of life, let's talk about one of the simplest and most powerful things we can continue giving senior dogs. Access to the outside world. Not necessarily huge adventures, just access. Open the door and let them smell the morning. Sit together in the yard. Take a slow drive somewhere interesting. Go to a quiet park. Find a shady place and just hang out. Let them smell somewhere new. Because for dogs, experiencing the world isn't only about how far their legs can carry them. Their nose can experience an enormous amount while their body barely moves. And this is why I don't love measuring a senior dog's activity only in miles. Your watch might say you only walked half a mile, but your dog may have had an incredible morning. They smelled where another dog walked, where a rabbit crossed, what the neighbor cooked, who visited overnight, what changed since yesterday. We look at a walk and see distance. Dogs experience information. So don't underestimate the value of a slow outing. And don't underestimate routine either. Novelty can be enriching, but predictability can also become increasingly important as dogs age, especially if they're experiencing sensory or cognitive changes. Knowing when meals happen, knowing where their bed is, knowing how to get outside, knowing where their water is, knowing what happens before bedtime, routine can make the world easier to understand. That doesn't mean that every day has to be identical. It means that we're creating enough predictability that your dog feels secure while still giving them opportunities to engage with life. And that balance will look different for every dog. Which brings us to something we haven't talked about enough just yet: veterinary care. As dogs age, regular vet care becomes increasingly important, because senior dogs are more likely to develop conditions that benefit from being identified early. And sometimes those conditions begin with changes that are easy to miss at home, or even changes that look completely unrelated. Drinking more, urinating more, changes in appetite, weight gain, weight loss, changes in coat, bad breath, new lumps or bumps, coughing, changes in breathing, difficulty getting comfortable, changes in stool, changes in sleep, changes in behavior. None of those automatically mean something serious is happening, but they're worth noticing. And this is where knowing your dog's normal becomes incredibly useful. You don't have to become hypervigilant and analyze every sneeze, but know your dog. Run your hands over them on the regular. Notice their body. Notice how they move. Notice how they eat. Notice how they drink. Notice their bathroom habits. Notice their energy. Notice their sleep. Notice their behavior, and when something changes, write it down. Because our memories are terrible at gradual change. We adapt. That's what humans do. If your dog gets 5% slower every few months, you may not notice. But a video from a year ago might make the difference obvious. So take videos if you can, not because you're documenting decline, but because you're creating a baseline. Record your dog walking occasionally. Getting up, moving around the house, doing normal things. And if something changes later, you have something to compare it to. You can also keep simple notes. Nothing elaborate. Things like, didn't finish breakfast today. Had trouble getting up after nap. Woke twice overnight. Didn't want to go upstairs. Really energetic on morning walk. Over time, patterns become easier to see. And patterns can help you and your vet team make better decisions. But there's another kind of monitoring I think matters just as much. Notice the good things. We spend so much time looking for what's wrong with senior dogs that it can become easy to constantly evaluate them. How are their joints? How's their appetite? How was their poop? Did they sleep? Did they stumble? Did they cough? Did they drink too much? These are all important. But also, did they wag when you came home? Did they sniff the entire yard? Did they get excited about breakfast? Did they steal your spot on the couch? Did they ask for belly rubs? Did they carry their favorite toy into the room? Did they stand in or near the kitchen while you cooked because there was a microscopic possibility that food might fall? Did they lie in the sun? Did they do something ridiculous? These things are important too. And it's good information. Quality of life isn't measured only by what's going wrong. It's also measured by what's still going right. And that's why I think it's helpful to know what your individual dog's favorite things are. Not what dogs are supposed to enjoy, what your dog enjoys. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's sniffing. Maybe it's lying outside. Maybe it's car rides. Maybe it's greeting people. Maybe it's carrying a toy around. Maybe it's digging through blankets. Maybe it's walking to the mailbox. Maybe it's sitting inside while you drink your coffee. Those little things become incredibly important because as your dog changes, you can keep asking, how can I preserve these? If they can't do it the old way, can we find a new way? Maybe your dog can't climb onto the bed anymore, but can you give them a ramp? Maybe they can't walk to their favorite park, but can you drive them there? Maybe they can't chase a ball, but can they search for it? Maybe they can't wrestle with their dog friend, but can they take a slow walk together? Maybe they can't handle a long car ride anymore, but can they take a 10-minute drive with the windows cracked? Change the activity, preserve the joy. And there may be eventually things that we can't adapt. And that's part of aging too. But we don't have to take things away before our dogs tell us they're ready to let them go. Senior dogs deserve appropriate protection. They also deserve autonomy. They deserve opportunities to explore, to make choices, to learn, to communicate, to participate in family life, to do dog things, because they are still dogs. And they still occasionally deserve to make decisions that are deeply inconvenient for us. Because again, they are still dogs. Gray hair doesn't change that. They don't need us to spend every moment mourning the dog they used to be. They need us here with the dog they are now. And I think that's another great gift that we can give a senior dog. To stop constantly comparing today to yesterday. To stop measuring the walk by how far they used to go. To stop measuring play by how long it used to last. To stop looking at every gray hair as something being taken away. And instead we can ask, what does a good day look like now? Maybe it's slower. Maybe it's quieter. Maybe it requires medication and rugs and ramps and a ridiculous number of orthopedic beds scattered throughout the house. Maybe your walks don't make it around the block anymore. Maybe dinner happens a little earlier because somebody becomes extremely opinionated about the schedule. Maybe you've learned that when your dog stops halfway through a walk and looks toward home, you listen. This is the relationship changing again. Just like it changed when your puppy grew up, just like it changed when your teenager became an adult, you are learning another version of each other. And senior dogs have something their younger selves didn't have, and that's history. Years of it. They know the sound of your car, your routines, your moods, the places you go together, the words you say that you didn't even realize you taught them. They know which cabinet holds the treats. They know exactly where you're going to sit. They know when you're getting ready to leave the house, and somehow they even know the difference between you putting on shoes to take out the trash and putting on shoes for a walk. You've spent years learning each other, and now the relationship asks for something new. Attention, flexibility, patience, advocacy, and the willingness to change the world around them when they can no longer change themselves to fit it. So make the floor easier to walk on, make the car easier to get into, make the walk shorter, make the puzzle easier, make communication clearer, make rest more comfortable, make the environment more predictable, but whenever you can, keep the sniffing, keep the exploring, keep the choices, keep the learning, keep the routines they love. Keep the adventures, even if adventure now means driving to a park and sitting under a tree together. Make their world easier. But don't make it smaller just because they're getting older. Because the goal of caring for a senior dog isn't simply to add days to their life, it's to add as much life as possible in their days. And eventually, caring for an old dog asks us to recognize something that we've known from the very beginning, even if we don't really like to think about it. We don't get forever with them. And that's a conversation for another day, but today, they're here. And there is still so much life to live. So let's finish this episode by talking about what it means to have the privilege of knowing an older dog. There's a photograph somewhere on your phone of your dog when they were younger. Maybe they were a puppy, maybe you adopted them as an adult, maybe it was the first day they came home, and every once in a while you find that picture again, and you look at it. Then you look at the dog sleeping beside you now. And somehow it doesn't seem possible that they're even the same dog. The face in that picture isn't gray yet. Their body looks different. Their eyes look different. Maybe there was a little more chaos behind those eyes, and maybe even a lot more chaos. And you remember the things you had almost forgotten. The shoes they destroyed, the ridiculous thing they were afraid of, the first walk, the first night home, the training problem you were convinced you would never solve, the phase you thought would last forever, and somehow it didn't. None of it did. The puppy became the teenager. The teenager became the adult, and somewhere between thousands of completely ordinary days, the adult became the old dog sleeping beside you. That's the strange thing about time with dogs. The individual days can feel completely ordinary. Breakfast, walk, work, dinner, outside, bed, again tomorrow. But eventually, you realize those ordinary days become a life together. And personally, I think that's why there's something so special about knowing an old dog. You have history. Not the kind anyone else would necessarily understand. Small history. The first apartment, the house you moved into, the walking route you've taken 1,000 times, the spot on the couch that stopped being yours years ago, the neighbor they always look for, the cabinet where treats live, the sound of the leash coming off the hook, the bedtime routine that neither of you intentionally created. All these tiny things that become your shared language. And after enough years together, sometimes you barely need the language anymore. You know what that look means. They know what you're about to do before you do it. You reach for your shoes and they already know whether they're coming with you. You start walking toward the kitchen and somehow they're there first. You look at each other across the room and you understand. That's what years together can build. And then the senior years ask us to use everything we've learned about each other. To notice when something is harder, to notice when something has changed, to notice when our dog says, I don't like that anymore, and to answer, okay, we'll find another way. That's what this entire episode really comes down to. Adaptation, not giving up, not constantly trying to hold on to the dog they used to be, and not assuming that because something has changed, everything has changed. Your senior dog may walk more slowly, but they're still walking with you. They may not hear your voice from across the house anymore, and you can find another way to call them. They may not jump into the car, you can just help get them there. They may not want the 5-mile adventure, maybe they want 20 minutes at the park. They may not chase the ball 50 times anymore, maybe 5 is enough, or even less. And maybe someday they don't want to chase it at all, so you find something else. Maybe the activity was never really that important. Maybe doing life together was, and that hasn't changed. So pay attention to the gray face in front of you, not with sadness, with curiosity. Who are you now? What feels good? What feels difficult? What do you still love? What do you need help with? What do you want to do today? Keep asking those questions, and listen when the answer changes. Talk to your vet when something doesn't seem right. Don't dismiss pain because your dog is old. Don't dismiss confusion because your dog is old. Don't dismiss behavior changes because your dog is old. Age gives us context. This is true. It shouldn't stop us from asking why, though. Give them traction, give them comfortable places to sleep, give them appropriate movement, give them opportunities to sniff, let them learn new things, let them solve easy problems, let them make choices. Advocate for them when the world becomes too much. Protect them when their enthusiasm exceeds what their body can comfortably handle. And when they stop at the same bush for what feels like an unreasonable amount of time, maybe just stand there with them. You don't always have to get somewhere. Because one of the things that senior dogs can teach us is that a good life isn't necessarily measured in distance, or speed, or how much you accomplished. Sometimes a good day is breakfast. A walk around the block, a really interesting smell, a nap in the sun, dinner, your favorite person sitting beside you, and maybe a snack that you successfully convinced them you hadn't already received. That's a pretty good day. And as our dogs get older, maybe our job becomes less about filling their lives with more and more about making sure the things that remain still matter. Comfort, curiosity, connection, choice, dignity, joy. Whatever joy looks like for that particular dog, because there is no universal version of a good senior life. There is only the dog in front of you. And if you've listened to this entire developmental series, think about where we started. With a puppy experiencing almost everything for the first time. A little brain absorbing information about this enormous world. Then adolescence. testing, exploring, changing. Then adulthood. The years where life settles into a rhythm and the relationship deepens. And now, the senior dog. The dog who has spent years learning the world and years learning you. Because that is the privilege of knowing an old dog. You get to meet every version of them. And if you're really lucky, you get to love every version of them. The wild puppy, the impossible teenager, the adult who became part of the rhythm of your life, and the gray-faced dog who needs you to slow down just a little now. None of those dogs disappeared. They're all right there, in the dog standing in front of you. So don't spend these years only looking backward at who they were, and don't spend them only looking ahead, worrying about how much time you have left. Look at who's here, today. Because your senior dog isn't a memory yet, they're not a goodbye, they're your dog. And there is still breakfast tomorrow, there are still smells to investigate, there are still naps to take, there are still things to learn, there are still routines to follow, there are still good days to have. So make the floor easier to walk across, take the shorter route, turn on the hallway light, bring the treats, let them sniff, and meet them exactly where they are. Because they spent their entire life learning how to live in our world, the least we can do when they get older is to make that world a little easier for them. Although this was a hefty end to our series, I hope you'll share this episode with someone who needs it. Someone who loves their aging dog. Someone who might want to understand a little bit more. If you have any questions or any suggestions for future episodes, please do let me know. I would love to hear from you, because your voice belongs in the room too. And as always, please tell your dog I said hi. The information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for veterinary or professional behavioral advice. Always consider your dog's unique needs, remember that every dog is different, and consult qualified professionals when appropriate or necessary.